Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Odyssey. Thank you guys so much for wherever you are and whatever you're doing to take time out of your busy day to listen to the show. You guys have made it a huge success so far, and I can't thank you enough. We've got a great guest coming up here tonight on the show. He's coming to us from Louisiana. His name is Tyler, and he's got some amazing stories to tell you guys. I can't wait to get started. But as always, let's open up the show and just let you know if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, please send me an email. You can get me at brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. I answer those daily. You can also private message me on Facebook at our Facebook page, Sasquatch Odyssey, and on Instagram at Sasquatch Odyssey. Like I said, we've got a great show. It's kind of a long show. We went a little bit over. It's close to an hour, so let's get right into it tonight.
All right, let's welcome Tyler to the show. Tyler comes to us from Louisiana, and he's had several encounters with Sasquatch. Thanks for being on the show tonight, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. It's my pleasure. So just kind of walk us into, let's kind of do it chronologically. I know if you've had multiple encounters, let's start with the very first one and just kind of go chronologically and walk us into each encounter, when it happened, where it happened, what you were doing, and kind of walk us in and tell us what happened to you, man.
Okay, sounds good. My first encounter was deer hunting. There's a 300, I believe, 5-acre property that my family owns here in northwest Louisiana. It's all hardwood timber on one side of the road and pine on the other, so really good deer bedding area, plentiful wildlife. My first year to hunt there, had spoke with my uncle about going out there and setting up a stand. He said, sure, And he told me, he said, there are things out here that you've never seen before, and he said, there are things that'll scare you, and there are things that you'll see that'll never make you want to hunt again. He said, but, you love to hunt. You're a grown man. He said, you make your decision when you get there. And I said, okay, I didn't think anything about that. Bought a little ladder stand. I'm a bow hunter, avid bow hunter, love to bow hunt. We put the stand together, put it on the side-by-side, drove over as close to we could as the bottom I was going to hunt that we could. And we put that stand up sometime around 11 a.m. I went back to the stand. Say I got on there at probably 3 p.m. Had 2 does come to me. Stood up to draw back, could never get a shot. I just sat down, chilled out. And I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Sound like, crunching in the pine straw and the leaves that we have here. And I can hear things coming from a long way, so that's why I was able to, distinguish, okay, this is something heavy, this is something bigger. I was thinking this was going to be a buck. But it sounded more like me walking through the woods like a person, like a human. And whatever it was taking its time, and it was very heavy. I knew that. I couldn't see it yet, but I was watching the deer and their movement, the 2 that were there with me. And as I started looking around the tree, not to give my position, I saw a bipedal creature. At first, I believed to be a person. At first, I believed that it was my uncle. And it made no sense because he was hunting a stand across the road. He was a mile and a half from me. And it come from a completely different direction than we ever took to go into that patch of woods, since I had started going down there and kind of scouting the area. And the deer that were in the area right there below me looked back at this person that I thought at the time. and put their head back down kind of cautiously and kept eating. And that really, really bothered me, because if I was walking around in the woods, you know, ghillie suit or whatever, they're going to break and run. And it scared me because I didn't see a gun, didn't see a knife, didn't see a bow. No hunter's orange. You know, state regulations, you have to wear hunter's orange when you're hunting. I mean, this person, if it was a person, in my mind, was being very, very reckless walking up on, you know, woods that are heavily hunted by people on all different sides. And I noticed that it was all one solid color, and 6 foot, 6'1", 2 maybe, being in a ladder stand. I mean, you know, the distance, the height, the judge of the height. I'm not a very good judge of height. I don't think anybody is from 18 foot up in a tree. But it walked with a stride that I'd never seen before. Long arms, long strides. I mean, probably one of its steps was 5 of mine, and it was very, very unsettling. I noticed that when I did see its face, that it was all one solid color and had the darkest eyes I've ever seen. I mean, it scared me really bad. All I had was my bow. The deer milled around below me and kept watching back, and the stench of it is another reason that I thought it may have been a buck. You know, bucks sometimes their glands will give off a certain odor, and I thought, but it was a bad, like a feral hog in mud smell. It was a very musty smell. Long, shaggy hair on the upper torso. I knew that I wasn't looking at a human once I got a very good look out in the open of this creature. And the wildlife had seen this before, because they reacted as they had seen it before, like this was nothing new. You know, at that time, I'm kind of trembling in that stand. I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get out of here? I can't, you know, I've got a ladder to climb down. I've got to get out of here without being seen. And this thing probably doesn't know I'm there, because this is the first time I've been in these woods. That's the first time anybody's ever hunted these woods. I've got that in my advantage. So I waited until this creature broke off to the left behind me, probably. The closest it got was 30 yards, and it broke off to my left, and I would guess that it made it 50 yards away from me out of field of view. And I got down out of the stand and ran back towards the direction that I had came in from without looking back. So I'd just come out of Marine Corps boot camp. I wasn't scared of anything. I felt like I was bulletproof. But this scared me, because it was definitely not human. And my odds with a bow and arrow weren't very good, and I didn't want to harm it, but I didn't want it to harm me. As I was running out, I jumped over 2 piles, and I went back to the area later and observed this, you know, inspected it, but it was 2 piles of kindling. It looked like kindling, you know, what you would break up to build a fire, start a fire with, of hickory, broken all in even pieces, probably 1 inch to 1.5 inches long, and it looked like someone had put them in a pail and then turned that pail upside down, and they were spaced evenly apart. And I want to say, to my best recollection, maybe 2 foot apart, 2.5 foot apart. I jumped over those piles, and that was very unnerving, because I'm in, you know, hardwood bottom. There's not supposed to be, you know, that was just a weird thing to see there. But I jumped over that. I ran through the cutover out to the blacktop, and I was still so unsettled by it that when I turned around and intended to have to draw an arrow and defend myself, but when I turned around, I didn't see it. So I still didn't like the position I was in. I got on the 2-lane road, and I ran probably another 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile to my uncle's home, his farm, and got my truck and drove back to the point of entry to the woods to wait on him and his daughter to get out of the woods. When they came out of the woods, he had shot a buck, and we met up, and the best thing he said, hey, what happened? He said, you're pale as a ghost. And I told him about my encounter, and that's when he opened up to me about, he had lived on that property since I was probably 6, 7 years old. The early 2000s is when he moved out onto that property. And he had hunted those woods. He'd seen a lot of things, and he had kind of normalized it. I told him my experience, and he had kind of normalized it at that point. And he began sharing some of his stories, which are, crazy. One of those being, he shot a deer in the woods right below the stand I was on, and he had a pop-up blind there, and this creature come from off of a creek bank, grabbed his deer by the 2 back legs, and we're talking about probably a 80 to 100-pound doe, threw this deer over its back and began walking away with it. And this was the first time he had experienced it. And he said that, he went into full defense mode. It was time to either fight or flight. And if the creature would have turned on him, he would have defended himself. But as soon as that creature got out of sight, he left the woods the same as I did. So it felt good to know that, I wasn't the only one that had experienced it, and I wanted to know more. And that's where the other encounter started.
Well, I want to go back real quick, if I could, to what you saw from your stand. You said it's probably at the closest maybe 30 yards to you, so I know, you may not have seen a lot of detail. But can we go back to the face and the skin on the face, and could you sort of describe that for the audience as much as you can and as much detail as you can? What did the face look like? Was it a human-like face? Was it more ape-like? What was the skin? What color was it? Was it black, gray, that kind of thing?
Sure. The eyes is what I pretty much were fixed on the whole time. I did see the face. Like I told you in my description, and I failed to mention, it was like a reddish brown hair around the face and pretty much the whole body minus what had been matted together, kind of a matted fur that was more of a darker brown color. The skin that I saw, like underneath the eyes, was more of a black, wrinkled texture. I could tell that much, being as young, and having good eyesight. I could see some things about it that really threw, this wasn't a plastic costume by any means. This was real, like very leather, weathered textured, dark black skin. It was more human-like than I would like to remember. One of the scary things about it, I felt like I was looking at someone that kind of had a puffy face. I didn't see, and the thing about it, I didn't see where the point between, another thing that threw me off, the hair came all the way down to the top of its eyes and then slightly under the cheekbone continued. So I never saw this creature's mouth. It was completely covered. All I could pretty much see was from the top of the eyes to maybe the bridge of its nose. And like I said, it was very, very human-like. The movements told me something different, but the face I would, expect to pull the hair off and see. Like I said, my uncle, an older gentleman with the more weathered, wrinkled skin,
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. I've heard so many different accounts where some people will say, hunters have had these things in their sights from deer stands and on the ground, and they're just like, I couldn't take the shot because this thing looked too human in the face. It's curious that you smelled the smell because, most people that are in the Bigfoot world, or at least, when I started looking into the subject, I just thought the smell was pretty synonymous with anybody who sees these things, but it's actually not that common. So I'm always curious when somebody sees these things and then smells that really pungent, I think your description was great of like a boar kind of mud, musky boar in the mud kind of smell. I'm just curious that once you had this encounter and now that you've had this experience, and nobody knows, of course, but what do you think? Do you think that's just a smell from being out in the woods and being unkempt and unbathed, or some people have this philosophy or this idea that that's something that they put off when they're stressed? Well, clearly this thing, you don't even think it saw you. So what do you make of the smell? Do you think that's just one of those things that is there sometimes and it's not, or do you think it may be some sort of a defense mechanism that they secrete? What's your take on that?
In my opinion, I believe it's an environmental factor. The area that this creature resides in and is very much still there is very dark. It's like I said, it's pretty much a swamp behind a hardwood bottom. This creature is walking around in mud probably half the day. I mean, where it resides, you can't go down there and just boots without getting your feet wet. I mean, it's trudging. It's moving around in a very, very wet, musky area. I know, once the defense mechanism, I mean, that's a great point for me. Like, I've never thought about it like that. I always contributed to an environmental factor just because, the feral hogs here smell like that, and it's so very possible that this creature, experiencing the same terrain is giving off the same odor due to where it lives.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think it's probably more of an environmental thing, and like I said, some people have, I've heard stories and seen encounters where these folks are, literally 10 feet away, 5 feet away from these things, and they don't smell anything at all. So I guess it just could be something that's environmental. I think that's a good point. One last thing before we move on to your other encounters, the piles of kindling that you said you encountered in the woods. What do you make of that? I mean, do you think that was maybe a coincidence? Do you think maybe the creatures had something to do with placing them there? Do you think it's possible that they use fire? Tell me a little bit more about that. What's your ideas on that? Because you kind of went back and even looked at it, I think you said, after your encounter. So what do you make of the piles of kindling?
It's, in my honest opinion, I believe that certain things that they do, for example, those piles of kindling, that's what I would have used that for. I believe that is some sort of boundary marker, because I found other things that were very, very off, that you wouldn't see in the woods, just randomly occur in the woods, that were close to areas that we later found out, and experienced these creatures. I believe that it is either some kind of boundary marker, some kind of signal to another creature, because these objects were never used. They were just placed in a certain spot, which makes me think that it was a signal of some sort or a marking of boundary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see how that could be possible. It's always funny to me when I listen to people's encounters, and you see these. I'm in a lot of Bigfoot groups and Sasquatch groups on Facebook, and people post these pictures of broken trees in the woods, or trees laying in an X, and everybody automatically jumps to the conclusion that it's Sasquatch came through here and broke the tree, or Sasquatch left an X here because you're not supposed to go this way. Most of those things I think are probably a natural occurrence, and there's a more natural, a natural, I don't know what the word is, but it's a natural occurrence, right? It's not something that somebody's placed there or something is placed there. But the piles of kindling were really, I've never heard that, so I think that's probably, I think you're probably spot on. It's probably got something to do with a boundary marker or something along those lines. So, all right, well, just go ahead and walk us in. I know you've had other experiences, so, just kind of going chronologically, what was your next experience and encounter, and where were you, what were you doing, and kind of walk us into what happened then?
Sure. actually went back to the next move for me was to go back to the area, of course, with my uncle present and a weapon. I'm not even going to lie about it because I was so unsettled by it. We went back in the same way that I came out, and we saw the piles of kindling, and I went in and inspected that again. I found a ball of sticks, twigs, if you will, that were maybe, I would say, a quarter-inch in diameter. They were all these things that I'm finding are the same size. They're all broken the same way. They're all the same length. They're of the same, species as far as tree. It's very, very, it's almost like when people say, oh, I have OCD, everything has to be the same. It's very particular, specific on what I found there as far as what it was composed of. There was this ball that was 3 foot in diameter. My brother actually held it up, and we took a picture of it with my camera. And it was a cylinder, of course, a spherical shape, and they were woven together almost like a wicker basket, but into a complete ball. It looked like a beach ball made of twigs, and I'm not exaggerating. That's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And it was close to the piles of kindling. And I kept walking up the hill, and beside a big white oak tree, there were 3 sticks, probably 2 inches in diameter. They were broken off on both ends, and they were all relatively, like I said, 2.5 foot long, and they were leaned up against a tree perfectly, side by side. And this is in the middle of a 300-acre plus property, Trespassers are not an issue here. I mean, it had to have been done by the creature that I saw or another creature. I know that may sound, like I'm obsessive or so, like, it has to be. And it's not, because people don't just break off limbs like that and set them beside a tree, 1.5 miles off the road, from any house, and, I'm just going to do this because it's something to do. It like I said, it was very, everything was so particular. And we went and inspected that area, showed my uncle what I had found, and we decided to go across the road. He had a doghouse blind over there with a chair and a bucket in it. We went to go check his trail camera. He had his shotgun. I had, I believe, my rifle. We went to go pull the card on the camera, and we noticed that his stand was turned upside down. That blind was turned upside down. Or overturned, excuse me, it was on its side. And his bucket and his chair were missing. So we looked in the, within the 20-yard area to see maybe if the wind had done it or whatever, but it was kind of hard to blow a chair and a bucket over 20 yards. The wind, we're in a hardwood bottom. The wind doesn't get that bad here in Louisiana. We're pretty much a wooded area. We kept walking down the pipeline looking for these items and decided to veer off into the woods to our right, which was on the edge of a cutover, clearing. And we found his bucket and his chair in an area that was constructed of pine limbs leaned up against a bunch of sawbriars, and then had pine straw on top of it. That bucket was in one of these enclosures. It actually looked like an enclosure where something would get out of the rain. It was all matted down on the inside. I automatically started looking for hair, but I couldn't find any. I believe it was because of the dampness of the area at the time. And we found his bucket, and this is quite a distance away from his stand. I would say over 200 yards from his stand, which for a person to come and deliberately take a bucket and a chair out of his stand, walk into the thickest cutover that you've ever been in your life, and place these items inside sawbriars, that's a far reach for me. We found his chair about 50 yards behind that on the edge of that hardwood line, and it was placed beside a tree, a pine, and, you know, hadn't been damaged, hadn't been broken, anything like that. You know, we're looking at each other like, okay, you know, something has gotten to this equipment. And we begin to walk back down toward the creek to see if we can see any footprints. Because my uncle's a believer, you know, I mean, he believes, he told me, you know, like I stated before, he told me, he said, you'll see things down here, and, you know, and then at that point, okay, I'm fired up, I'm ready, you know, I want to see these footprints, I want to make sure that what I saw was, I don't want to look crazy, and he's, you know, and having someone with me like him who's been there, who's seen it, who's experienced it, it helps out a lot. So, you know, he's about it too. So we go down toward the creek bank and we start looking, and I swear, just like on the TV shows, I heard a knock in the woods, and he told me, we got real quiet, he said, that's how they communicate. And we heard a knock in front of us, probably, I'm going to guess, less than 100 yards. And then we heard one further up the hill, a little bit further, and he said they're in the area. Well, I'm still, you know, looking around to see what my surroundings are, you know, what's coming up. And this doe, we're standing probably 10 foot apart. This grown female deer, or doe, runs right towards us out of the woods. We could hear her coming. This is probably within, you know, this happened by the time we stopped and we heard the knocks and all. We're talking about 10 minutes here. This doe comes running towards us, and she's exhausted. I mean, she looks like, you know, people run deer dogs down here all the time, and, you know, when they run deer, they'll be running for hours, and those deer will get so tired, and their tongue will be hanging out. They look just like they've been chased all day. This doe come running towards us, and when she got to us, she got in between us and stopped. And it really threw me off because this deer saw us and stopped in between us, and we looked at the deer. I could have ran over and grabbed the deer. It was so close to me. She was being chased by something in the direction of the knocks. That is the direction she came from. And my uncle looked at me. We cut our eyes at each other, and we looked at this deer, and we didn't know what she was going to do. She stood there for probably 15, 20 seconds, and it astounded me. I've never seen anything like that. And she ran, you know, back towards the direction that we had came, which would have been the direct opposite direction of the way we were facing. And we heard another knock and a whistling sound. And we kind of converged together, got really close, and he said they're probably chasing the deer. And he said, that's crazy. She ran in between us and all. And she was so scared of what was chasing her that she ran up to two humans. And that's, like I said, I can't say it enough. That's crazy to me. These white-tailed deer down here, they don't play with anybody. If they see you, they'll run. If they smell you, they'll blow. I mean, you know, white-tailed deer have very elevated senses. She found refuge in us, and that really opened my eyes to something else. With the previous day, me hunting and seeing that those two does look at this creature and put their head back down and, you know, cautiously begin eating. And then this deer runs away from, you know, the knocks and the whistling sound. It kind of was counterproductive. You know what I mean? Like, why were these two deer not scared of it, but this one's running from it? It almost made me believe that some of them are good and some of them are bad. You know, it was very, very confusing at the time. And then as the future experiences go on, I realized that the two deer that I first saw were probably just dumb, because this thing will damage a human or an animal or an object if it gets in its way. And I believe that that doe was food that day, and, you know, these creatures tried to catch it.
Yeah, I've heard that story over and over and over again about doe, even some bucks running up to hunters and laying down under their tree stands and just exhausted, and then they hear or see things in the woods that were chasing these deer. And it's fascinating to me. We have white-tailed deer here in North Carolina. I walk out. We've got 35 acres here, and I walk down to check my mailbox, and there's a big open field down across the road, and I can hear the deer sometime when I'm walking up. I hear them spooking and snorting, and I can shine a flashlight and I see the eye shine going up the hill. They don't stick around when a person's walking up on them. So it's just really interesting how, like you said, maybe the first two were dumb. I don't know, or they just weren't on the menu for that particular day, and the first one you saw was just taking a stroll. But I think you're absolutely right. I agree with you. When these things are in hunt mode and they're communicating, and I believe they work together to hunt, I think that the doe was definitely on the menu. I think you're spot on with that for sure.
Definitely. That was my thought exactly. So
what was that? You mentioned something about you've seen these things firsthand and what they can do to animals, or is that sort of tie into your next encounter or your next experience? What happened with that?
It does. And my uncle came up with the weirdest theory, and I still believe that it could be true. We pulled his trail cam card and took it home and looked at the pictures, the photos, and there was a deer that came in, and I believe his camera pulled every 5 seconds. I believe it was set. It was an old Moultrie camera. It was a big clunky thing, outdated, but it still had good, picture quality, and that's where we got our pictures of the creature beside his stand. There was another deer that came in at 3 o'clock that morning to that corn pile where the Moultrie camera was, and of course it took photos of that deer in 3 frames. One when it walked in, it appeared in the picture. The next one, it was turning away, so that was within 5 seconds. And you could see behind it 2 big eyes, glowing eyes, and probably, judging from a trail cam picture, I'm just going to throw the number that I thought as far as the height. I would say probably 6.5 feet tall if I were to scale it, and judge it for myself. This pine tree, a small one, probably a sapling, probably, 3 inches in diameter at most, and then tapering up, was pushed over, and you could see the creature standing and its eyes looking, and that deer, evidently sensed it and ran away. Well, the next picture is that pine tree halfway folded back over, so it was all the way down, and then the next picture caught it when it wasn't fully erect, but at maybe a 45-degree angle. So we caught some, pretty cool pictures of, live action there. And
I would love to see the pictures. And I know you mentioned you took one of the ball. If you have any of those and you'd like to send them to me, I'd love to take a look at them and maybe throw them up on the website.
Sure, I will. I've got footprint pictures. I've got the pictures of the ball, and the kindling pictures, and and then the trail cam pictures like that. That pretty much led to the whole obsession with taking a picture of what I saw that was out of place. And like we had talked about with the animals being in hunt mode, most of the pictures that we got of the creature stalking prey were at night, after midnight, between midnight and say 4 a.m, which is probably one of the reasons why we didn't see many deer that year. But we took it upon ourselves to go across the road from his house in a very, dense forest area and go see if we could see an eye shine or anything like that. So my brother, myself, and my uncle's twin brother, my dad, we all went down into the woods. And they were, shining a spotlight here and there. Of course, we weren't spotlighting animals. We were trying to see if we could catch this creature. And they shine eyes, eye shine, probably 40 yards in front of us, and it turned out to be a possum. Well, my brother saw the eyes and, of course, was scared to death, so he shot the possum off the tree. And it was probably sitting up on a branch that was probably 4 foot off the ground, and it was minding its own business. And, hey, you know, you win some, you lose some, and some people just get scared and pull the trigger on something. You know, that's why you can't take everybody with you. But when that possum was killed that night, my uncle had a 75-pound blue razor's edge pit bull. Her name was Desi. She wasn't scared. She would fight a grizzly bear. It didn't matter. She was a very protective dog. We'd actually wanted to, you know, hog hunt her. I mean, she was tenacious. And that dog that night ended up having its head smashed flat. And I don't mean, you know, bite marks, claw marks, a hog bit its head, a mountain lion, you know, around here we call them cougars. But nothing got this dog. This dog wasn't ran over by a car. Something stomped that 75-pound pit bull's head completely flat. It was very disturbing. We love the dog, you know, of course. Hate it when an animal passes away like that. And, you know, that's just not something that happens every day. I mean, it's needless to say, but she was killed the same night that my brother shot that possum. And later on, after we went to bed, of course, you know, we woke up and there she was, you know, laying down there in the edge of the woods with her head mashed flat. And if I wouldn't have seen it, I would have never believed it, but I lived it firsthand. And my uncle told me, and this is going to sound, you know, kind of out there, but he told me, he said that he believes, and I'm starting to believe it too, that these creatures find some animals in the woods endearing. Maybe they have, you know, a relationship with them. Maybe, you know, it's a, you know, the possum can sit on this tree for free tonight. We're not going to hunt him, you know, just let him do his thing. They may walk by and pet him. I really don't know what's going on. But we've experienced that if you take one of theirs, we'll take one of yours. And I know that may sound crazy, but that's really what we have determined because, you know, we went down into its territory. You know, my brother unfortunately killed a helpless animal, and then this dog ends up dead. So it's kind of either she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or, you know, they weren't happy about us being down there, and we took one of the most docile creatures in the forest, in the woods, away from them, so they decided they were going to do the same to us. That may sound pretty far-fetched, but he really does believe that.
No, I don't think it sounds far-fetched at all. I mean, I think these things are intelligent, and I think they have some sort of, you know, family unit structure, and it's not far off at all that they would have some sort of relationship with the animals that they share the forest with. So I don't find that strange at all, to be honest. I think it's probably pretty accurate.
Well, I'm glad you do, because I've sat for a long time. I've lost sleep over that one many nights. But that was the violent, you know, we really saw what this creature was capable of. I mean, you think about it, a pit bull, you know, they are known as aggressive animals, and she was a very, she wasn't actually the only dog that was harmed during, you know, our time there. My uncle had and this was, you know, the next experience that I encountered. My uncle had a Mastiff and Boxer mix. She was brindle. She was probably, you know, a 70-pound dog. She had been sent to obedience school, very, very protective of his children. He actually got her because, you know, they live in a rural area. He works, we both work in the oil field. We're gone from home all the time. He got the dog to protect his wife and kids, and she was very good at it. She wouldn't let anybody come on that property. She wasn't scared of anything. Wonderful animal. She's since passed away. But we had walked in the edge of the garden behind his house. He had actually put up some motion lights. And the motion lights had went off one night, and of course we thought it could be a smaller animal or whatever because we didn't hear the dogs acting up. But we decided to go out to the edge of the garden that night because, you know, we kept hearing different sounds out there in the edge of the woods. We were coming in and out of the house, grabbing things out of the truck and whatnot. And so we decided, well, we'll go down there and shine and see what happens. My dad and his wife went down the pipeline behind the garden and went into the woods probably, I'd say, 75 yards from where me and my uncle were standing at the edge of the garden, and he had Piper, his dog, with him. And she was there, you know, for protection, of course. And my dad and his wife yelled out to my Uncle Stephen and I, hey, something's coming to you. When they entered the woods, they heard something running through the woods right there. And that's the place where we had found some, you know, structure-looking things. You know, and I've got pictures of them, you know, the pine straw, the branches laid against the tree, you know, and it looks like something had been laying down on the inside of it, almost like a wooden cave, pretty much is how I can explain it. And my uncle had Piper with him, and, you know, he was fully intending, you know, if something come out of the woods, you know, Piper was going to be what protected us. And so we heard the running towards us, and he unclipped Piper from the leash, and she went into the woods. And this is wild to me. I don't know what could have done it other than this creature. Piper went into the woods, and we heard the most blood-curdling yell, just a deep, deep, grisly yell. And that dog was thrown over both of our heads high back out into the garden. Something picked that dog up, and it sounds so far-fetched, but she was on top of whatever was there. My dad and his wife were probably pushing in front of us, probably at that time 45 to 50 yards in front of us, so there's a good distance in between us. And when she entered the woods and we heard that yell, you know, shortly after, she was thrown out of the woods and landed, you know, on her back right there in front of us. And she was up, like I said, I'm 5'11", but she was thrown, when she come out of the woods, she was over my head high. 70-pound dog being thrown that high, and as tenacious as she was, she had really gotten a good grip on whatever was out there. When she come out of the woods, we heard, and it sounded like someone was running a skid steer through there. I mean, it was just, you know, stuff being pushed over, and it sounded like a herd of cattle. And running off to our left down towards the creek. So we ended up, you know, walking down that, or pretty much running down the side of the woods to follow it as far as we could to maybe get some kind of eye shine or some kind of sight of this creature. And we never did. It broke towards the creek, and it was too thick, and it was dangerous for us to go in, especially that time of night. I mean, you know, whether we walked up on it or feral hogs or, you know, anything else for that matter, we were just deciding, okay, this is a good stopping point. And the fact that dog was thrown that high away from us, you know, or towards us, and it really floored me. I really respected the strength that this animal has. I respected the just the resiliency of the animal, because, you know, it's out there in the woods learning how to protect itself, whether it be a juvenile or grown. It experiences, when it experiences things in nature, I believe it's prepared for that. But when humans start becoming a variable, you know, they have to learn what we're going to throw at them like we have to learn what they're going to throw at us. And that night it ended up being a 70-pound attack dog. You know, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because Northwest Louisiana is occasional black bear. You may see one, but, you know, a 70-pound dog being thrown at you, that's a little out there.
Yeah, man, that's wild. I've heard many stories about these things, and they don't seem to like dogs. I've never heard of any type of encounter that's been great with a dog. It's always usually been aggressive or the dog's been attacked or something along those lines. So, yeah, that's fascinating, man. Just to imagine the size of whatever grabbed that dog and threw it. And that's the thing. Bears don't pick dogs up and grab them and throw them. It just doesn't happen.
No.
You got to have thumbs for that. So, just the fact that, you know, most of these encounters get attributed to black bear, you know, it blows my mind that, you know, black bear can't do those kinds of things. And what else in the woods is going to pick up a 70-pound dog and throw it at you, you know?
That's right.
Well, that's fascinating, man. Is that all you guys have experienced? Have there been other experiences that you've had, good, bad, or indifferent?
I've had a few more. And I decided, you know, we decided that we were going to hunt, you know, together from that point on. And my little cousin, my uncle's oldest son, had decided that he wanted to go hunting. So at that point, I said, okay, well, I'll change the area that I'm going hunting in. And I'll take him with me, and we'll go sit in a tower stand down in front of the house, which was probably directly in front of their house from where we found the pit bull that was killed. I would say probably 300 yards away from there through the woods. So, you know, we weren't that far away, but we were far enough away where I felt like we were in an open spot where if anything came to us, you know, I could make sure that both of us were safe. And, you know, I didn't hunt those wooded areas as much anymore. And I wanted to take my little cousin down there. And, of course, I couldn't show any weakness in front of him. So, yeah, we're going down through the woods. I followed the pipeline down to my uncle's brother-in-law, which would have been my uncle by marriage, of course. His hunting spot that he hadn't hunted in a while, but his stand was still there. And, of course, they had kept it up to date and cleaned out and cleared. We got in, and there were wasp nests in the stand. So, me, you know, I've already walked down this far. We might as well sit down under this tree beside the stand and, you know, not get bit by a wasp or stung by a wasp and finish our hunt. So, I love to use a grunt call. Always have. You know, trying to call in a big buck. You know, that's what we're all chasing out here anyway. And my little cousin, he was fascinated with it. You know, he was having the time of his life. And, of course, here I am sitting thinking, okay, am I going to see this thing? Am I going to have to explain to him or keep him from running away from me? When he sees this, he'll never want to go in the woods again. My mind was in 1,000 different places while we were hunting. So I started blowing that grunt call just to kind of spice things up a little bit and kind of take my mind. And, you know, I'm sitting there kind of shaking him because I'm thinking, okay, you know, I've got to be strong for this kid. And here I am, a grown man, trying to keep my wits about me while I'm waiting for a white-tailed deer to walk out. I'd say after I started grunting, behind me I heard footsteps, heavy footsteps, probably anywhere from 20 to 50 yards behind me. I'm just going to throw that number out there. I'd say it was no more than 50 yards. I wouldn't have heard it if it was any further than that. That's the way I can judge it. But I smelled that smell again. And something just within inside of me told myself, okay, this is a buck. You know, I'm grunting, this is a deer. You know, we're during the rut. You know, he just smells bad. You know, he's marking his territory, whatever his glands are. Yeah, I just told myself that's what it was. And I grunted, and I'd quit. And I'd grunt, and I'd quit. And I'm thinking, this deer's going to pop out in the open any minute, and I'm going to take this deer, and, you know, we're going to be good to go. Well, little did I know, the deer would never come out, but footsteps would continue for an hour and a half from my left at the same distance of 20 to 50 yards in maybe a half moon, so a half circle around me, never in the open, but I could see through the edge of the woods when it was at my far right. And I could see the same, probably, I'd say at that point it was probably, you know, 50 yards away through the woods. I could see just a hint of the dark, you know, brown, reddish hair walking through the woods. And my little cousin's sitting there with me. I can't afford to get up and run. I have to sit there and wait for this thing to go or come out and me protect us or whatever. But, it's best not to run from a predatory animal, so I stood my ground and I sat there hoping that we'd make it out alive. And it continued to do that, like I said, for an hour and a half. And when I saw it, I was just waiting, okay, when you get out of sight, we're going to leave. And we're going to leave rapidly, but we're not going to run. So my little cousin, I kept telling him, he doesn't know. He can't see over my side to see what I'm looking at. I said, okay, he's going to come out in a minute. I kept comforting, telling him that that's what it was. And it was comforting me, too. Once it got out of sight to my far right, and began walking in front of us through some thick woods, I thought, okay, we got enough space between us. I said, okay, Dustin, let's go. And we got up and we started walking out. And I tried my best not to look over my back, but I kept looking over my back the whole time. And I walked, to the truck, unlocked the door, put him in the truck, and then went around the side and went back towards my uncle's house. His mother-in-law and his wife's mother's mother live in a adjacent house to theirs, and when we got up to the house, his mother-in-law came down the porch and was almost in tears, and she said, "Thank God y'all are okay." Yes, ma'am, we're fine, we're good, we didn't see anything or whatever. Of course, I wasn't going to tell Dustin what I had saw. And she said, there was a man that lives down the road. He lives right. She explained to me where he lived, and of course I didn't know. I hadn't been further past that area. But she said he had stopped in their yard. We heard, we were close enough to the road where we could hear traffic on the two-lane, way back behind us. This man had stopped in her yard and told her that when he was coming around the corner, right where the pipeline is, that we went down to go hunt. He said a monkey, and this is what this older gentleman, he was probably 65 years old, well respected in the community, he pulled up and he told them, because they were his neighbors and because, this was on their property, he said this monkey walked up the steep ditch on the right side of the road from me, got up on two legs, and walked across the road and entered the woods, and that would have been the direction that was directly behind my back where I heard the footsteps. Of course, I had seen what I had saw, so I knew that it was there, but this man, backed up my account. He backed up what I had said, because this creature that he saw came right in behind us and, and would have been in the same area that I started hearing the footsteps and saw what I saw. And she was beside herself. She was glad that we were okay. And I said, yes, ma'am, we're fine, And I told her, I said, maybe it's best that, we give Dustin some more time, let him get a little older or whatever before we take him back in there, because if he sees this thing, it's going to really change. He's never going to want to hunt again. A kid at 11, 12 years old sees this and they're like, the woods are not for me. And I didn't want that for him. I'd rather us be together, 2 or 3 of us at the same time and let him have a good experience. And just thankfully he didn't see what I saw, but that man was, courteous enough to say, hey, you've got something going on here. I just want to tell you what it is. So really eye-opening experience for us there.
Yeah, it's really cool when you got somebody else that can actually sort of corroborate what you've seen. And not that you necessarily need that, but it's always a good thing for somebody to say, hey, dude, I saw X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, I saw the same thing. So it just adds layers to the credibility of the story, frankly. And I totally know what you're saying about the, not wanting your nephew to be wanting a good experience hunting and whatnot. And it seems to me that people who tend to have the more aggressive type behavior, particularly in the South, seems to be hunters who are out by themselves, or maybe 1 or 2 people. But they don't seem to have the same aggression when there's 3, 4, 5, 6 people gathered in an area. It's more of, a curiosity and a playful type behavior, maybe some pebble throwing and stuff like that. But the actual aggression, it's like, just like a person, I guess. You're not going to walk up into a group of strange people and start a problem with one person when he's got 6 friends standing next to him. So I guess it kind of makes sense. It's sort of like regular human type behavior. So that's really fascinating, man. I don't even know what to say. That's some pretty cool experiences. Is that the last thing that you guys experienced? Has there been anything since that?
There has. It's a lot of action out there, to be honest with you. We've started to believe that if we don't make our presence more known in the woods, that it's going to get to the point where we can't go in them anymore, because the aggressiveness for us started closer to his home. He had purchased a trailer, a single-wide trailer, sometime, early in the 2000s, and decided he was going to remodel it and either resell it or do something with it, place it on the property for a hunting camp. I don't know what he was going to do with it. But he had it set right there between his house and the garden behind the barn. And it was in good shape. I mean, he got it for, recreational purposes, I'm sure, but he wanted to maintain it, and make it better than it was when he got it. So, we were going to do some remodeling work to it and stuff. And one night, his mother-in-law's mother, of course his wife's grandmother, had come over to their house, just walked across the, field there to eat supper. And they finished supper, and it was time, for her to go. And I wasn't there at the time, but I witnessed, the destruction that it left here. When he was walking his grandmother out to her home, they heard an primate sound. He said, "Sound like a monkey." He said, that's what his grandmother had said. She said, "That sounds like a monkey. What is that, Stephen?" And he said, "I don't know." And he said, let's get you home, and and I'll go check it out. So he said when he got her into the house, the whole time he's walking back to the house, he could hear it sounded like metal being crunched, and that, whooping, yelling primate sound. And so he went in the house and grabbed his flashlight, his spotlight, and his revolver, and went back around the back of the trailer to see, if someone was breaking in or whatever. And he saw the creature. And, when he shined his light, the creature started running away. And he chased behind it to see where it would go. And he fired his pistol in the air a few times, just to scare it away and to see what it had been doing. And I have pictures of it. It's pretty crazy to me. That trailer, of course, had that kind of tin siding on it, maybe like a light metal siding. I don't know how to explain it, but it was an older trailer home. This creature had ripped two of those panels off and had began tearing the insulation out of that trailer from the outside. It tried to get in the door, I believe, but the door was locked in the back, and it may have butted up against it or something. We didn't see any visible damage to the door, but it had grabbed, and you could see where this had been grabbed and mangled and pulled off the side of that trailer. And insulation strode all over the ground. This creature was trying to go inside that trailer. And for what? To loot, to find something to eat, I don't know. But it was making a big commotion and tried to get inside that trailer. And that's not the only experience that he's had with this creature trying to enter a dwelling or a building for that matter. It's been in the barn, and they've got big 2x6 horse stalls in the barn. It's been in there and just wreaked havoc inside the barn. And, there's someone always there. If somebody was coming up there and just destroying property, someone would know it. I mean, there's 5 people that live on that property, one of which works out of town all the time. But the mother-in-law and the grandmother and the wife and, of course, the children are there most of the time, minus the time that the kids are at school. And it's hard to believe that, anyone could come up there and just do as they please while these people are defending their own property. And this creature just took it as, okay, I'm going to go down there and rip the siding off this trailer house and go in it. And I mean, he or she ripped it all the way to the studs in the wall and began grabbing the 2x4s. And you could see where partially 2 of the nails and the spacer boards between 2 of the studs had been pulled back. why it was trying to get in there, nobody knows, but that was another experience shortly after. I know that, the motion lights and all, they had started getting a little more activity toward the house. The older people, they'll go out and dump their scraps from supper and stuff out in the backyard or behind the barn or whatever. When they started dumping a lot of scraps, they started having a lot more activity. The dogs were running the house and hiding under the bed, just different things. And he would go out there and hear things running through the woods. One night he actually saw the creature running back into the woods, and it was scared of him because I think he startled it. I think he came out the front door intentionally and came around the house, just kind of creeping until he got behind the barn and he shined the light, and it runs away. So the only aggressiveness that it's had towards objects or animals has been a dog and, pretty much property damage. There's been no human harm, violent nature towards humans at all. Just it letting us know that it's there and it's going to do what it wants to do unless we stop it. And that's what's scary about it, and that's why we think that possibly, if we don't really get in those woods and let our presence be known, we're not going to be able to go back in them for a while.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I'd love to see the pictures. Like I said, whatever you have, if you'd send them to me, you've got my email address, so just send them to me via email because I'd love to see them and throw them up on the site, maybe under the episode. Great experiences, man. That's fantastic. It feels like we could probably do another interview, and you could probably talk for another hour about your experiences because it seems like you got all kinds of things going on. It almost sounds like when you're talking about the folks dumping the scraps out there, it's almost like they're having an unintended habituation situation where they're feeding these things with the scraps and not really meaning to. If the activity's picking up because of the scraps being dumped, that may be something to certainly be aware of for moving forward, for sure, because I've heard that from other people. You start doing things that are not normal, and then you almost draw these things in, and they're finding a free food source or an easy food source, and it's like the activity picks up around the house. So that's interesting.
For sure. I mean, they were dumping the scraps out for the dogs, just away from the house where they didn't have to smell them. And, and this thing that scares the dogs to death, the dogs will run back to the house. And, to this day, they know when this creature's outside because, the dogs at home, like, I say 2 nights ago, we were on a job and his wife called him and said, hey, the dogs ran in the house. And said, Rowdy got under the table and Rebel got under the bed and, they went outside and it was just so quiet and the dogs were scared to go outside, and it was just one of those things where, these dogs don't have a bluff in on this creature. This creature is doing what it wants to do. When they dump those scraps out for the dogs, it just, the dogs won't even stick around. Like when this comes into the area, like you said, it's unintentional. They are trying to do something good for the animals of the area, but they end up attracting the unwanted attention.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of. And I think, a lot of times people make the assumption that these things are the friendly forest giants. And, I look at them like I'm encountering a grizzly bear. I'm not going to go up and feed and try to pet a grizzly bear. And I certainly don't want a grizzly bear hanging around my house and trying to get inside and terrorizing my dog. So, I'm not in the camp of going out and shooting them and killing them. And, I think that's probably the only way it's ever going to be proven as to what it actually is. But, it's kind of live and let live, and you have to take precautions around your house when you live in these types of areas, just like you do with bear. You got to secure food. You can't just leave things out, and because the unintended consequences could be something that you definitely are going to regret. So,
right.
Well, fascinating stuff, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your experiences tonight. It's been a pleasure, man, and I've really enjoyed hearing your stories. I appreciate it very much.
Oh yeah, I thank you for hearing me out, and let me share the things. And I have a lot of questions, for people as well. Like I hope, when I'll start listening to the show and get some other accounts and, and kind of see maybe similarities or differences in regional behavior and things like that. And if you know of anyone, and this is just me throwing a feeler out there, or a group of people or something, that are interested and would like to be, involved in maybe finding more about the creature, potentially, getting pictures, getting accounts for themselves of this thing or multiple creatures inhabiting a certain area of woods. They're there, they're in numbers, they're strong. We've tried to contact BFRO to come out and do a show at this place because, this activities went on for years. This is 2021. I'm saying since the early 2000s. I mean, they're strong here. We've been trying to get a group of people to come out and check it out and see if it can help the community, if it can help science, if it can help, researchers, historians, whatever. We're opening the doors to people. If someone wants to come there, we'd be more than glad to give them, free reign of the place just to come check it out. We've let certain people put up cameras on the property. They've gotten pictures. Deer hunters in the area have told us their accounts. If you know of anyone who wants to take a trip and wants to come see what 300 plus acres inhabited by multiple Sasquatch are, we will give you the key to the gate.
Absolutely, man. It sounds great. And anybody that would like to do that, they can certainly shoot me an email. Go to the website, shoot me an email, and I'll act as a conduit. I'll connect you guys and put you together. So thanks again for being on the show, man. And for all you guys listening out there, if anybody's had an encounter and you want to be on the show, send me an email, brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. You can get us on Facebook at Sasquatch Odyssey and Instagram at Sasquatch Odyssey. Thanks again, Tyler. I appreciate it very much, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and have a nice day.